The book was written in 1945, so the year the Second World War finished, and the world was obviously going through a depression, and there's a lot of tumult in the world, and Orwell was concerned about it, but he didn't want to address it directly. So he thought if he wrote a book and used animals, it would be his way of getting around the problems and the issues. Okay, all right, Animal Farm by George Orwell. That's not his real name, by the way. Now, it's as pertinent now as it was when it was first written in 1945. Now, when we say pertinent, we mean relevant. All right, the issue is as relevant now as it was back in 1945. A novella, which just means a very short novel, full of double meanings and lessons for us all. So a double meaning means that somebody will say something, but they mean something else. And maybe, if we're focusing, we can understand what they're really saying. All right, that's a double meaning. Okay. The story of Animal Farm is about what happened in the Soviet Union, the USSR as it was, and the rise of Stalin. The socialist ideals were in place in the Soviet Union, but as Stalin rose to power and strengthened his power through violence and fear, these ideals became corrupted. Okay. So who is the author? George Orwell, the 25th of June, 1903 to 1950. He was an English writer, but his real name was Eric Arthur Blair. He used the name George Orwell for his novels. That's what we call a pseudonym. He was born in India during the British Empire's rule of India. He is best known for two novels that he wrote in the late 1940s, and that is Animal Farm and 1984, another brilliant novel, which I think we should tackle in the next session. In those works, he said that totalitarianism, especially Stalinism, was very bad. Orwell fought in the Spanish Civil War with the anti-fascist troops. These troops were against the dictatorship of fascist governments. Get my tongue around that. Orwell died of tuberculosis in London. So why did Orwell write Animal Farm? Well, Animal Farm was published after World War II in England in 1945 and in the United States in 1946. George Orwell wrote the book during the war as a cautionary tale. This means one to, a be careful tale. All right, a story, in order to expose the seriousness of the dangers posed by Stalinism and totalitarian government. Orwell faced several obstacles in getting the novel published. First, he was putting forward an anti-Stalin book during a time when Western support for the Soviet Union was still high to its support in Allied victories against Germany. Secondly, Orwell was not yet the literary star he would become, or he would quickly become. For those reasons, Animal Farm appeared only at the war's end, during the same months that the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The tragically violent events of the war set the stage well for Orwell's fictional manifesto against totalitarianism. All right, so that's what the book represents, a fictional manifesto against totalitarianism. Briefly, well, what is totalitarianism? Totalitarianism is a form of government that attempts to assert total control over the lives of its citizens. It is characterized by strong central rule that attempts to control and direct all aspects of individual life through coercion and repression. In other words, they're being forced to do it. It does not permit individual freedom. So let's briefly understand about the Russian Revolution. So centuries of harsh rule under the Tsars or emperors of Russia came to an end with the Russian Revolution in 1917. The revolution took place in two stages. In the end, it gave the Russian people an entirely new form of government. The background: the common people of Russia had few rights under the Tsars. They protested the situation in 1905. Afterwards, Tsar Nicholas II created a lawmaking body called the Duma. The Duma was supposed to give some of the citizens a say in the government. However, the Tsar still held most of the power. So the first part of the revolution was in February. In 1970, Russia faced several challenges. The country was fighting Germany in World War I. Russia was also short of food and fuel for the cold winter. In the capital city of Petrograd, now called St. Petersburg, angry people protested the harsh conditions. The army joined the protesters instead of stopping them. So Tsar Nicholas had to give up all power. This was called the February Revolution. A committee of the Duma appointed a temporary government to replace the Tsar. This government was unstable to solve Russia's problems. A group of workers and soldiers rose to challenge the government, and the group was called the Petrograd Soviet. Other Soviets soon appeared in other cities as the governments grew weaker. The Soviets grew stronger. Several different political parties fought for control of the Soviets. Eventually, the party called the Bolsheviks came out on top. Their slogan of peace, land, and bread made them popular. Vladimir Lenin led the Bolsheviks. All right, then there was another revolution, and then there was the Civil War. Okay, so let me read the last bit. The Civil War. Lenin made peace with Germany in March 1918. In the process, he had to give up much of Russia's territory. This made many Russians unhappy. Some of them started a civil war. In such a war, different groups within a country fight each other. The armies that fought the war were called the Reds and the Whites. The Reds represented the Russian communists, as the Bolsheviks called themselves. The Whites represented other groups that wanted to control the country. During the war, the communists killed the Tsar and his family, even though he had abdicated. So why they did, I'm not sure. The communists won the war in November 1920. And in 1922, they gave the country a new name, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. All right, and Lenin was their leader for many years. And when he died, this fellow grabbed power. Joseph Stalin was born into poverty. Now, this is important to know about Stalin because he's going to represent Napoleon, all right? He was born into poverty, but as a teenager, he earned a scholarship in order to study for priesthood in the Georgian Orthodox Church. Georgia is a part of the Russian USSR at that time. It's an independent country now. It was in the city of Tbilisi that Stalin became interested in and was exposed to the works of social philosopher Karl Marx. All right, so he was born in Tbilisi, and that Stalin became interested in and was exposed to the works of social philosopher Karl Marx. Eventually, Stalin was expelled from the seminary. That's where people go to learn how to become priests, all right? Institution for missing his exams. And he became involved with the contentious faction of the Marxist Social Democratic movement. In order to aid in funding his political organization, Stalin was responsible for a series of bank robberies for which he was arrested, imprisoned, and exiled to Siberia. Stalin's rise to power began in 1912 when the Bolshevik Party, in which he had risen in ranks, came to power in Russia. Stalin's rise steadily increased as the Soviet Union was founded under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin. When Lenin died in 1924, Stalin seized power, political power, of the Communist Party, probably under force by killing a few of his opponents, probably. Under Stalin's dictatorship, which began in the late 1920s, his plan was to centralize control of the entire Soviet economy. Anyone who opposed Stalin's political measures was killed, imprisoned, or exiled. Stalin's reign of totalitarian dictatorship continued with more imprisonments, exiles, and killings of those who politically opposed his regime. He died from a stroke in 1953 at the age of 74. Major is a pig at Manor Farm, and he has a dream where animals are not ruled or controlled by humans. He tells the other animals on the farm about his dream in the form of a song called Beasts of England. Now here beasts means all animals. So when you say beasts, you're referring to, cats, dogs, horses, whatever. Okay, so the Beasts of England. Major dies just a few days later, but some of the other pigs, Napoleon, Squealer, and Snowball, decide to carry out his dream. They drive the farm off Manor Farm and rename the farm Animal Farm. The farm works well with the animals running it themselves, and everyone seems really content and happy. But soon things start to go wrong as Snowball and Napoleon struggle to hold the most power. Snowball wants to build an electric windmill, but Napoleon is opposed to the idea. He is against the idea. Snowball gives a roaring speech as to why the windmill is a good idea, and shortly after, Napoleon's puppies, now trained as killer dogs, attack and chase Snowball off Manor Farm. Napoleon decides that from now on, the pigs make all the decisions. He also decides that the windmill is a good idea and works the animals hard to complete it. When the windmill collapses, potentially due to the design having thin walls, Napoleon blames Snowball. The pigs start to act like humans, sleeping in beds in the house and drinking whiskey. All the original rules that were first set out are changed, including 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, as the pigs start to wear clothes and walk around on 2 legs. There is a degree of fear felt by the rest of the animals who feel compelled to do as they are told for their own safety. So compelled means they have to do it because they're fearful if they don't. What would happen if they don't? This book ends with the farm being called Manor Farm again, and with the pigs doing business with humans from the other neighboring farm. So when you start reading Animal Farm, you'll quickly realize that the characters are meant to represent real life people. Okay? Not imaginary people, but real life people. And here are the animal characters. So Major up at the top left-hand side is the aging pig with big tusks that haven't been trimmed. And Napoleon, who's the black pig there, and Snowball, and Squealer. Benjamin the donkey, who's really bored with the whole thing. Boxer, who's a little bit silly, is a bit stupid, he's not very bright. Clover is a very sweet mare. Mare means female horse. And then the humans that are involved. And Molly, and I like to think of Molly rather like we do a lot of young girls now, who's really interested in makeup and clothes and taking selfies of herself and putting them on Instagram. Okay, a bit like Molly. She's not concerned about anything serious at all. Very sort of flappy type of girl. All right. So those are some of the characters. There are other ones that appear, of course, but these are the main ones. So Mr. Jones, right, is the human. He's the original owner of Manor Farm. And Old Major, the pig, tells of a dream that leads to rebellion. And he's representative, of course, Karl Marx and Lenin, those Russians who had this wonderful idea of a sort of a utopian type of country, socialist country where everybody was equal. And there were no wealthy and no poor, that sort of thing. Napoleon Pig, leader of the rebellion, and he represents Joseph Stalin. The horse, his motto is, I'll work harder. And he represents the workers and the laborers of Russia at that time, the oppressed. Snowball, who's a horse, is the original leader of the rebellion, and he represents Leon Trotsky. Now, Squealer, the pig, is Napoleon's minister of propaganda. In other words, false information. Clover, the horse, is a motherly type who silently questions some of Napoleon's decisions. Now, she's very motherly. She doesn't want to upset anybody. So she silently says, "Are you sure about that, Napoleon?" Very diplomatic. Molly, the horse, as I just mentioned, is very flippant. All right, should be the selfie taker young girl. And Benjamin, nothing's good. And Moses the bird is a raven. Ravens are just like black crows, very similar, very intelligent. And he represents the Orthodox Russian Church. And then you've got Jessie, Bluebell, Pincher, who are the dogs, whose puppies become Napoleon's guard dogs. And Frederick, who's a human, he's an unscrupulous farmer. That means somebody that has no scruples. He doesn't have any ethics, no morals. He only does what he does in order to benefit himself, even if if other people are harmed as a result of it. So he has no scruples, this man. And then, of course, you've got Pilkington, who does business with the animal farm.